Wow, what a really exciting talk we have today with Alex Miller, a certified ketogenic and carnivore lifestyle coach. She found this way of eating in early 2020, just as the pandemic was setting in. Alex found a great success eating a keto lifestyle, healing her hormone imbalances, period issues, mental health concerns, which included anxiety, PTSD, and PPD, and losing excess body weight. Alex came to keto from a vegetarian and at times vegan diet for more than 10 years. Although she struggled with the concept that vegetables are bad for us, after reading many books and listening to many podcasts, Alex took the carnivore plunge in early 22 and has never looked back, as her health and mental well-being have skyrocketed to a whole new level. Alex is a strong advocate of keto carnivore for the whole family, as she has seen firsthand just how much her kids thrive on this way of eating. She also encourages all her clients and followers to practice daily mindfulness and gratitude exercises, as this is truly the secret to happiness in life. Join me for welcoming Alex. Thank you so much, Alex Miller. God bless and welcome. Alex, hello, hello, hello.
Hi, Dr. Kiltz. How are you?
I am very good. How are you doing on this very beautiful day in, let's see, it's still winter, but it feels like spring. I don't know where you're at.
Yeah, it's a bit springish today. We're in double digits, so we're at like 10 degrees, which is pretty exciting.
Let's see, you're in Canada somewhere, is that right?
Yeah, I'm on the west coast of Canada.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. How far? Vancouver, north, which?
Yeah, I'm just slightly east of Vancouver. We're about an hour away from Vancouver.
Oh, that's beautiful, beautiful. Years ago, I'm from the West Coast, and we used to travel up to Seattle all the time. And I took a trip up through Vancouver, and then Vancouver, and went east.
Okay.
And then I dropped down, I think, Lake Louise area, and I'm probably too far north, but somewhere in there. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful environment to travel through.
Lake Louise is gorgeous. It's one of my most favorite places in the world. Like it's got to be one of the most picturesque places I think you can get in Canada. It's awesome.
It is. I live in Skinny Atlas, which is in upstate New York. It's a beautiful lake. And tonight or today, it's just the lake is glass and the reflections of the sky. It's just been amazingly beautiful. And I love this type of climate and the environment that is much more natural than the kid from LA, because that's where I came from.
Yeah, no, for sure. I get that totally.
Yeah. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us. And maybe you can tell our listeners or watchers a little bit about yourself. And this is meant to be sort of very low key, questions and answers. If you have stuff for me, it's open. But we want to learn more about yourself and how keto and carnivore and how you got into this crazy place.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alex and I'm 37. And like I said, I live in Chilliwack, so in Canada, just on the West Coast. And I've lived here on and off most of my life. I spent about 10 years living in Australia as well. I'm actually a dual citizen between the two countries.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And, my older daughter was born in Australia before we moved back here to Canada. So I've got two amazing daughters, Isabella and Merida. Isabella is 7 and Merida is 5. Wow. And my husband, Glenn, we've been married for 9 years this year and together for 13. Nice. He's Australian. I met him when I moved over there. And yeah, so I went to school for teaching, and those are what my 3 degrees are in, primarily teaching music. And I did that for a long time, and then I took some time off, and I've actually just in the last few weeks gone back to work full time again. So it's been a bit of an adjustment and enjoying it. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Cool. What are your degrees in, and what was your teaching, or what is your job now that you're doing?
Yeah, so I have a Bachelor of Music focusing in music education, and then I have my PhD in education, and then my graduate diploma in education, secondary music. I'm actually working 2 jobs at the moment. So I'm working just as a substitute teacher at my daughter's elementary school, which is heaps fun. And then I'm also working part-time as a social worker, which isn't anything I ever thought I'd find myself doing, but I was sort of called to it, and it's been a really interesting thing. So yeah, I work at a couple of group homes in the area with kids that have just really had a tough start in life, and yeah, just helping them out. It's been really cool.
Well, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the music and how it's shaped your life and being a teacher. Where's that come from, and how do you use it in your life?
Yeah, so I mean, I think along the way, music really saved me. I'm really super introverted, and I really struggled in school, and I really didn't have many friends. And when I was going through school, the introverted thing wasn't really a thing, you know, like we know a lot about it now and we have a better understanding of it. And, you know, 1 in 4 people are introverted. But I was always told that I was just too shy and I needed to come out of my shell more. And it was hard going through school. And then I found music when I was in grade 8 or 9 and joined the bands. And then all of a sudden I had this place that I belonged, and it was pretty amazing. And so, yeah, I was in 12 or 13 performing ensembles through high school, and yeah, it was good, and I got a really good scholarship to go to university. And so when I initially went to university because I wanted to be a performance major, and I got kind of 2 years into it, and I decided that what I really wanted to do was share music with people, my passion of music with people. So then I switched into education and went down that route. And it's been an amazing thing for my life to go into education and share it with people. And a lot of what I do is working with the lower socioeconomic status. So people who can't necessarily afford to pay for lessons. I've spent a lot of my time teaching lessons for free or teaching lessons to the price that people feel that they can pay, because lessons are very, very expensive.
Yes,
so
yes.
Trying to make it as accessible as I can for people. And yeah, it's been a while now since I've taught lessons. My girls came along and things in my life changed focus a little bit, but it's exciting to be back more focused on that again now.
Do you have a particular instrument you love to play or teach?
Yes. So my primary instrument is alto saxophone. Although I haven't played it a lot lately, I've mostly been playing piano and guitar. They're just a little bit easier because they're right there. I don't have to put it together. I don't have to get it set up. Like my piano's just in my living room. I can just hop down and play it when I want to, and same with the guitar. So yeah, and my girls both like to play both of those as well. So they're good bonding experiences for us.
And so, well, maybe we'll talk more about music, because I think it's an important part of life that helps us sort of get into ourselves and get out of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's where that introvertedness, you get some sense, okay, I'm in, but now what can I do to sort of be part of some greater good and things like that. So tell us a little bit about your history of food and how you kind of sort of came to this keto carnivore world, and where were you in the past?
Sure. So, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. So, and, you know, eating pretty typical food pyramid, right? So heaps of grains. I'm absolutely a sugar addict. I've been a sugar addict since I was a kid. You know, we always had the low fat, high sugar things in the house, the fat-free yogurts, the cookies, the chips. You know, typical lunches at school would have been sandwiches and fruit roll-ups with juice boxes. And, you know, like my mom tried hard to follow all those rules that we were supposed to follow. And, you know, we had a dessert a few days a week. And so, yeah, I mean, sugar was definitely a thing for me. And it didn't have a super negative effect on me, I don't think, so much as a kid. Like I didn't have ADHD problems. I wasn't overweight. Then puberty hit, and man, oh man, did that all change. So, you know, I got my first period when I was 12, and the first sort of probably 3 or 4 of them were not so bad. And then they just became horrendous. You know, like they were absolutely cripplingly painful, couldn't get out of bed, was nauseous, vomiting from the pain. And so my mom, you know, being very concerned about me, took me to the doctor. And as you can imagine, what's the first thing the doctor says? Here's birth control pills, right?
Yep.
On birth control pills I go. And, you know, from that point onwards, the weight gain started to happen too. So, you know, I went from being a pretty average sized kid who, and by the way, super active too, right? Like I played soccer, I played hockey, I was a runner, I loved to be active. So from grade 8, I went from being a pretty average sized kid to, by the time I graduated from grade 12, I was 215 pounds.
Wow.
And you know, it was a combination of the birth control pills, which were awful. And then, you know, just the food addiction, which just became worse, right? And I mean, part of it was self-medication. The weight gain would happen, and then the stress would happen, and then the stress eating would happen. And, you know, hormones were all out of whack, and that caused things to be worse too. And it was pretty awful. And so then, you know, the dieting started. So I did the Susan Summers diet, and then I did Weight Watchers, and then I did Slim Fast, and then I did Herbal Magic, and then I tried the diet pills, Hydroxycut, and, you know, I tried the intense cut calories and go crazy with exercise side of things. And as with most people who try these, they do come with initial success. You know, you drop 10 or 15 pounds, but you're miserable and it's not sustainable. And eventually you gain it back, and usually you gain it back more. And that was my reality. And that was my yo-yo dieting for a long time. And then when I was 23, I moved to Australia. And when I moved to Australia, I didn't have any money and I didn't have a job. And for my first 18 months there, I couldn't afford to eat most days. So for that brief period of time, I lost a ton of weight. And I did it because I basically ate 3 or 4 meals a week, because it was a choice between paying for food or paying for a place to stay. And you know what? You have to have a place to live, right? So I lost a lot of weight in those 18 months, but then I got a full scholarship and things all changed, and I was able to start feeding myself again. And even being super, super careful, the weight started coming back on again. So at this point I decided, hey, let's give vegetarianism a go, because everyone talks about it, right? It's the cure-all pill for everything. So I went vegetarian, and I was vegetarian for nearly 10 years, and it just didn't make a difference. The weight still slowly came back on. I had a personal trainer at the gym. I was exercising 6-7 days a week, eating that super strict vegetarian diet. Didn't matter. And then so I got married when I was 28 or 29. And while I definitely wasn't like fat when I got married, I was bigger at that point, because I'd gone from being probably about 130 pounds at my smallest when I wasn't eating, up to, it's probably about 155 or 160 when I got married. And then 3 months after we got married, I got pregnant with Isabella. And, and yeah, even though I was super sick through my whole pregnancy, I gained a ton of weight, gestational diabetes, major hormone issues. And so, yeah, and I was about probably 190 pounds when Isabella was born. And I breastfed Isabella, thinking, again, obviously, you know, wanting to breastfeed, but also interested in the weight loss side of it, which was not effective for me either. And then so about 6 or 8 months after Isabella was born, I decided that I was going to give veganism a go, because again, right, you look at all the vegan,
all in.
And yeah, I got to go all in, right? Like feeling at this point, maybe I wasn't doing the vegetarianism thing right. Decided to give the veganism thing a go. And again, it didn't do anything. I didn't lose any weight. My energy got worse. My temper with my daughter got worse. And then we wanted to try for our second child. And with Isabella, we got pregnant our first go. With Merida, it took us about 5 or 6 months. And I'm quite certain now that was because of how messed up my hormones were. And so we did fall pregnant with Merida, and I stayed vegan. And then Merida was born 3 months premature, and everything in my life changed. And we were in the hospital with her for months. I went back to a standard American diet because we were eating cafeteria food, fast food, whatever it was, because we weren't at home. We were at the hospital in Vancouver for a long time. And yeah, so we went back to a standard American diet at that point. And that was my reality for probably 3 years after she was born. Combination of the stress, the post-traumatic stress disorder, major anxiety, major postpartum depression, all of that stuff. And I just continued to gain weight. So when she was about 3 years old, I was probably the lowest point I'd ever reached in my life. I was, 215 pounds. I couldn't play with my kids. I couldn't get on the floor with them. All I felt was just like anger from the post-traumatic stress disorder from her being born premature, the guilt involved in all of that. And I knew I just had to make a change. Like there just wasn't no two ways about it. So I started researching diets again, feeling, I don't know, not very hopeful because I just hadn't had luck with it at this point, right? And so that's when I found keto the first time. And when I first found keto, it was in early 2019. And it was a bit of a catchphrase at that point in time. So I started kind of doing a little bit of research into it, and I decided I'd give it a go. And it was really, really awful. And what I realized now is I was doing it all the wrong way. So I'd found this information that was the wrong information and put my information into this keto calculator, which had me eating 1,000 calories a day that needed to be almost entirely fat. And so I was like, drinking MCT oil, hardly eating any food, And it was just like, it was horrendous. And yes, I lost a little bit of weight, but I just felt so awful that it wasn't sustainable. And so I stopped. And life kind of went on a little bit longer, and I just kept hearing all this stuff about keto, and I truly just couldn't understand how people could do it long term because it was so terrible. Then I discovered Maria, and boy, did that all change.
Yeah.
So at that point, that was early 2020, just before the pandemic hit, and I found Maria's way of doing keto, and I was hooked, and it was amazing. And so I got doing it the right way, got doing it with the right calculator, got eating the right calories, got eating the right macros, and everything was amazing. And I lost a lot of weight in the first year, and I loved it so much that the following year, it was when I signed up to be a keto coach. So I did the program through Maria, and it was absolutely incredible. And then I discovered, sort of part of the way through 2021, keto desserts. And up to this point, I hadn't done keto desserts. I didn't know about them. They weren't a thing. I hadn't seen them. I didn't realize there were sugar substitutes. So I started seeing these people posting these recipes. So I started trying them. And at first it was pretty innocent. You know, I'd do 1 or 2 recipes a week, and then it got more and more, and then it triggered my sugar cravings. And then before you knew it, I was making these every single day. And over the course of about 6 months, I'd gained back probably 15 or 20 pounds of the 50, 60 pounds that I'd lost. And that's really what it was. Like, it was really, and it happened so gradually, I didn't even notice that it was happening. So then I cleaned myself up, but I found that even with doing keto, the cravings never went away like they did the first time I did it. And that's when I decided to give carnivore a go in early 2022, gave carnivore a go. And it's been incredible because for the first time in my life, I have no cravings. I don't think about food.
Wow.
I only eat when I'm hungry. Like, it just, I don't walk down the grocery aisle and think, oh, it would be nice to, try this bag of treats. It's just one treat. It doesn't matter. These major holidays come and go. I don't feel like I'm missing out if I'm not eating the pumpkin pie or whatever it is. And so, yeah, it's been a real game changer for me, the going carnivore thing.
Well, so first, that was Maria Emmerich you were talking about.
Yes.
And her keto amazing story in helping people around the globe. And I want to go back because first you talked about the birth control pill in school. Was it high school?
Yeah.
And did anyone ever talk to you about dietary changes or the proper diets that you might be, could help? And if they were talking about diet, was it focused on weight or on health?
Yeah, I mean, not really. My doctor mentioned to me a couple of times through high school that I could stand to lose weight. It wasn't ever about health. And my mom talked to me about it, but not that she brought it up to me, that I brought it up to her, that I was concerned that I was gaining weight. And she tried to help me by doing, like, she signed me up, for example, for Herbal Magic. She's the one who paid for it because it was quite expensive. Because I think, she was as at a loss of it as much as I was. Like, we hadn't made the connection to the birth control pills. We hadn't made connection to diet at that point, even around sugar and all that kind of stuff. Like, this was 20 years ago. So the connection wasn't being made. And no, the talk was never, ever about health. It was always about weight loss, always.
Right. And so the solution to your menstrual problems, your weight problems was always about go on a diet and that'll heal in some way. But in the meantime, here's a birth control pill, or was there ever here, this is temporary, or here, this is for the next 5, 10, X amount of years for the birth control pill?
Yeah, I mean, the doctor never ever put a date on it. He just put me on it indefinitely. And I preemptively went off of it when I moved to Australia. I just, at that point, started doing a little bit more research into it and was really concerned and went off of it myself. And then when I met my now husband, we talked about, how we were going to manage that stuff. And we talked about the possibility of me going back on birth control pills. And after researching it, I just didn't want to go that route. And thankful I did, but concerned that I was on it for 10 years before making that decision, and still to this day, like, I see posts about it on Facebook all the time. There are moms who are taking their teenage daughters into the doctor and just being put on birth control without even a conversation about it. Like, still now, there's not even a conversation about how carcinogenic it is and how much it's terrible for your hormones and everything else.
But among IUDs and other shots and things like that. So there are many of them that I don't think we're really adequately talking about how they affect our body and our hormones and things like that. Now, I'm just curious about your time in Australia when you ate maybe a few times a week and you lost weight. Do you think you ever were in a starvation mode or in a severe anorexic mode? Or I'm just curious how you handled that, because I suspect our natural eating habits are probably every 2 to 3 days and not every day anyway.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I suspect that you're probably right. And I think that when you look back on, just this civilization and how we evolved, you wouldn't roll out of bed in the morning as a hunter-gatherer and have your breakfast cooked over the fire every day. Like it just wasn't the reality. However, I suspect that when they did eat, they probably ate much more wholesome food than what I was eating, and probably a larger portion of it. So my food was white bread because it was the cheapest eggs you can get, and the little tiny cans of tuna because they were the cheapest meat that I could find. And then when I went vegetarian, it was just eggs and bread for a long time. So yeah, but I don't know so much about the starvation mode thing. I mean, looking back on it now, I probably was in, somewhat of a ketogenic state for the most part, because I would have burned off all my body fat, and probably because I was so big, it wasn't terrible for me because, I was 210 pounds, I wasn't going into this at 150 pounds and then, losing 60 pounds of that. Like I was 210 pounds and then, went down to 140 pounds. So, even at that point was still a reasonable weight.
Right, and I suspect that ultimately the getting heavier was really meant in order to survive the time where you found yourself suddenly without food of any significance. So in fact, the body was doing what it's meant to do, although you probably didn't eat. You ate more wholesome 50, 100,000 years ago, and depending on that. So tell us a little bit about how you got into you found Maria after you were doing keto wrong. And your drive was it at that time mostly for weight loss, or because you talked about postpartum depression, PTSD, menstrual problems and things like that? You couldn't get off the floor and things like that. Where was your drive?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest driving factor absolutely was weight loss. I struggled with weight my whole life, and humans are image-driven people, and that is important. So absolutely weight loss. The thing that I found with keto is the weight loss came fairly quickly, early in the journey. Like I don't feel like I had to do keto for very long before I started seeing those results. And I mean, the mental health side of things was important for me as well. Like I was struggling more at that point in my life than I ever had. And I wasn't being as good of a mom to my kids as what I could have been. And that stuff changed drastically as well. And, I did keto thinking that I would sort of do it short term, lose a little bit of weight, because that's what so many people do, right? They hop on it, they do it short term, they lose a little bit of weight, and then they want to go back to their normal way of eating. But because all the other things for me were falling into place, I couldn't leave it. So like, not only was I losing weight, I was also gaining muscle. I also had energy all day long, despite the fact that I wasn't sleeping because I had a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time, and then the menstrual cycle thing, that was huge for me. I have struggled with my menstrual cycle, like I said, since I was 12 years old. And for the first time in my life, I was in a situation where I wasn't on birth control pills and my menstrual cycle was controllable. Like, I mean, and now I've been doing it for so long, I don't even notice that it happens, except for I have a ding reminder on my phone that it's going to start the next day. I get no cramps. I get no PMS. I get no mood swings. Like I get nothing. I get no acne, none of those things that I used to get that gets dubbed as normal, that, women just have to suffer with because that's the reality. It's not the reality. That's the reality when your blood sugar is super, super messed up. And I know that now. And I mean, for me, that's probably been the biggest game changer. And my biggest reason for wanting to stay keto has been that, because you lose a week and a half of your life every month when you suffer with that stuff. And so many women do. And truly, it was debilitating for me for so much of my life.
And once again, the physicians, the doctors, the healthcare providers probably still never put 2 and 2 together, that your change in nutrition was the thing that healed you and not the pills.
No. And I mean, I've talked to my doctor a couple of times about diet, and she doesn't fight me on it. but you know, she doesn't know a lot about it, and she's not really comfortable saying yay or nay either way. You know, she just started, and I mean, at least she takes the information in, you know, like I know a lot of doctors will just full stop say, oh, you can't do that and it's really dangerous. I don't get that from her, but you can tell it makes her a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah. So where was the inspiration now to dig deeper with Maria and keto, and then again sort of meld a carnivore into that, and then begin to share it as a coach and someone that really wants to spread the word?
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that I've heard you say it a few times. It's like you have the secret to life, you know, and you just want to share it. And I feel that way because I look at the change in me. And then, you know, my mom came on board and the change in her. My mom turned 60 in March. She's on absolutely no prescription medication. She runs 6 kilometers a few days a week. She lifts weights. She still works full time, you know, like, and I mean, she's someone she's been on acid blockers almost her whole life for chronic, you know, heartburn and all, and she's not on them anymore. Chronic constipation, gas issues her whole life, completely fixed. You know, and same with weight issues her whole life, completely fixed. She sits comfortably at, you know, 130, 140 pounds. She's a size 4, like fit, healthy. And yeah, like I said, turning 60 next month. You'd never look at her and think that. And then, you know, I look at my sister, she hopped on board and it's same thing. You know, she's lost weight. She's kept it off. Her PCOS is in order. She's just feeling healthy. You know, she's much fitter. And then with my kids, you know, like one of the things that really made me want to try keto when I did is my 5-year-old was being diagnosed ADHD. Wow. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. Couldn't wrap my head around how my 5-year-old this could be our reality moving forward. And when I started researching into it, one of the things I found was the sugar-free. And I mean, I wasn't super into sugar so much once my kids came along, because at that point I understood how bad it was for you. And I tried really hard that they shouldn't have it. So then I was better about not eating it as well. All the while realizing now that all carbs turn into sugar, but like
all plants, right? All plants.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right. So, and so, yeah, I started doing the keto diet partly for that as well. And I mean, with her, within 2 weeks, everything stopped. All her challenging behavior problems stopped. She started sleeping through the night properly. Her complexion cleared up. I didn't even realize her complexion was an issue until we stopped eating like all the gluten and everything. And her complexion just completely cleared up. And I mean, she's a high energy kid now at 7, don't get me wrong, but she's not ADHD. She's not destructive anymore. Like she could get really, really aggressive. And she just has none of those tendency nows until she gets a sugary treat. And then all of that comes out in her again within half an hour of having it. And then it completely disappears, you know?
It's short-lived because it's probably okay to have a treat from time to time, like you would have a piece of fruit from time to time, or maybe some honey, but you were not having it all the time.
No. And with her, I'm mindful about when I let her have those, you know, like sometimes she'll ask me to send her sugary things in her lunch at school. And I just flat out say no. I'm like, you have a hard time sitting still at the best of times. I'm not going to send this because you struggle to regulate yourself, and all I'm going to do is make it worse. So after school, we'll have this treat, and then we can go to the park and we can burn off the energy for an hour, you know, and doing that once in a while, I don't think is a bad thing, but yeah, she can't have it every day. It affects her. And then my younger daughter, the same, you know, like, so like I said, my younger daughter was born 3 months premature, and she was 3 pounds when she was born. And she's always been underweight, and she's been chronically sick and in and out of hospital her whole life. And we've really struggled with it. And we went keto when she was 3. And you know what? Within 6 months, for the first time in her life, she was on the growth charts. It never happened to her before. It truly is incredible.
The plants are stunting our evolution.
I believe so. And certainly for her, they did. And her immune system started to get better. And it's not that she never gets sick, because she does, and she still gets more sick than we do, but she gets sick a lot less frequently than she did. And when she does get sick, it tends to be less severe. Like in the past year, I think I've only had her at the hospital 2 or maybe 3 times. And prior to that, it was probably 8 or 9 times a year for severe things. You know, like a stomach flu that she had for 10 days and she lost 10% of her body weight, or RSV, or pneumonia, or a fever that's 106 degrees, like all these things that just kept happening to her. And she's gotten so much better since going keto. It's incredible. And then I look at my husband, you know, my husband is bipolar, and he's been bipolar since he was about 20 years old. And he got diagnosed about 2 years after we started dating. And you know what? He did all the right things that they told him to do. He mostly gave up drinking alcohol, and he cleaned up his diet, and he took the medication that they said, and he saw the counselor once a week and the psychiatrist once a month, and he did all those things, and it did absolutely nothing. And for 6 months of the year, he would be absolutely manic and impossible to deal with. And for 6 months of the year, he'd be so depressed that he could hardly get out of bed. And you know what? The thing about bipolar is because it's a neurodegenerative disease, every time he cycles, does permanent damage to his brain, and the cycles get worse. And so, you know, years would go by and they would get more and more intense. And the last time he cycled, his depression was so intense that he actually missed work for the first time. You know, like he was so depressed, there were days where he couldn't get out of bed to go to work. And I had been doing keto for about 2 years, and I just finally said to him, like, this has to be the ultimatum. Like, you have to give this a go now, because I'm out of ideas as to what else to do. You've done everything they've said to do. This has to be the thing. And so, yeah, 18 months ago, he went keto, and he's not had a cycle since.
Amazing.
He's been stable. And he's not medication free. He still takes his medication, but we're at the point now that he's been stable for 18 months, and we're going to give some consideration into weaning off of that, because I'm not convinced it does anything for him.
It's hard to let go of our crutches for sure, because we still, that thing in the back of our brain says, I've got this disease and you need this drug.
Yeah.
And rather than thinking I am poisoned by what I'm eating, drinking, breathing, and living in. Yeah. So it's only a poison that we're experiencing, which is like an allergy or other side effects like alcohol, which is made in our bowels by the fermentation of the bacteria, yeast, and viruses. And I'll throw the virus in there because they're there too. Whether they're fermenting, I don't know. But we do know the bacteria and yeast ferment plants in our gut and make alcohol, aldehydes, heat, gas, and methane. Yep. So ultimately, whatever you've suffered, your husband suffered, your children suffered, I've suffered, we're all suffering. It's simply we're being poisoned.
Absolutely.
And we don't have a disease. No. Again, we've labeled these 20 million diseases, but they're simply, each of us gets damaged someplace in our bodies, and we label it a different disease, but it really is just we're having different organ cellular effects due to more likely plants and bacteria, yeast, and viruses, which are doing their work because they want to be alive. Yep. And we're their food. Even for plants, we're their food, and they're doing their work inside of us. So it's quite remarkable, all these things that we're learning. How are you using this in your day-to-day life, coaching others? Because I see you have a website. Let's see, what's Keto Coach Alex. Yep. .ca, and tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing there, what inspires you, and how people can learn more from you.
Yeah. So like I said, I took up coaching in 2021 when I did Maria's course, and it's really evolved a lot. I follow a lot of Maria's principles, but I don't follow all of them now. I've done a lot of reading and taken a lot of other things on board. And so, yeah, I mean, my coaching style is probably an amalgamation of a lot of different things now. I personally am really passionate about carnivore now. And I try really hard to win people over to the carnivore side. For a lot of people, that's a really big leap, you know, and I get that because that was a hard leap for me. It's hard when you grow up your whole life being told fruits and vegetables are really important to then leave them behind. You know, and I understand that. So with most of my clients, they come on board keto to start with, and very similar to how Maria does her keto way. I usually use her calculator and then adjust things roughly. And I talk a lot about the importance of eating meat, particularly red meat. I'm not necessarily opposed to working with vegetarians, but I think that I'd have a really hard time with it. I know that people do vegetarian keto. I just feel like that would be so hard, you know, like you just have to basically eat eggs, and I feel like that'd be too limiting. So I personally don't work with vegetarians at the moment. I've never had a vegetarian approach me about it. So yeah, I work and really emphasize the importance of eating a heavily meat-based diet. And then I try my hardest to get people to continue to limit vegetables and move towards carnivore. I've been successful with probably about 15% of my clients going over to carnivore and really liking it. So I'm really happy about that. And probably about 70% of my clients have stayed keto after leaving my services, which I'm really happy about too. And then I take a really holistic approach to my coaching. So for me, it's not just about food. It's about everything else that goes on in your life. Because, you know, making changes are all fine and dandy until things start collapsing around you. And then you fall back on what your old habits are. And for a lot of people, old habits are reaching for really bad food to come for us in time of need. So I try really hard to do holistic things. So gratitude exercises are really important, and I really encourage my clients to do that. And again, I'm surprised how many people are reluctant to do that at the start. You know, they see it as a really kind of hokey exercise. And all I say to them is just get up in the morning and either think about or write down 5 things you're grateful for that day. You know, like that's it. That's all you need to do. And eventually I think most people try it, but they're pretty resistant at first. And then once I get them started on that, I like to get people to think about things in their life that make them happy. Because quite often when things start to go wrong and then you're reaching for the comfort food is because you're looking for something to fill a void. And it's really hard in the moment to think of something else. But if you've got that list available, you can start looking at it, right? Like go for a walk, read a book, phone a friend, turn a TV show on, like whatever it is, having those things there that you can fall back on that isn't reaching for the food. And yeah, I find the clients that are more receptive to that holistic side of things are the ones that go on to be the most successful.
So finding keto is a step, and then adding on the mindfulness and the gratitude exercises, which anyone could do. And it's one of the things that I think is most powerful. And I think that's what drew me to listen to you more and understand that, because the value in the higher powers within our being and the creators of the universe is really amazing. And because the food, you know, when food is the thing that makes you feel good, but yet you can change your thinking, and that can also help you feel good.
Yes.
And as you said, a book, something to watch that's inspiring, or phone a friend, or just simply talk to yourself in a more positive way. Do you think we're sort of been taught to think more on the negative side, that we're incapable of it? We know where the diet part comes from. How about the mindfulness part of it that is so hard for so many people to get to?
Yeah, you know what I've realized over the last couple of years? So my mindfulness journey started about 18 months ago. And it started by reading, first I read The Secret, which I really enjoyed. And then I read The Magic. Yeah, and then I read The Magic, which is by the same author. And The Magic is a 28-day gratitude challenge. And I really recommend everyone I talk to, I say, go and read this book. It takes a couple of minutes a day. It's a chapter a day. It's for 28 days. It's pretty incredible. And what I've found since doing that, I now, and I've had to train myself because it doesn't come naturally. It truly doesn't. I now look at almost every situation that could potentially be negative. I've trained my brain to look at the positive. So for example, if I'm driving down the road and I get stuck in construction, rather than thinking this is really inconvenient, I immediately go, thank you to the people who maintain the roads so that I have a safe place to drive. You know, like just stuff like that. And so what I've found since going on this journey is, yes, I think people are inherently negative. I think that it's easier for people to be negative. When I talk to people, and almost always the conversation, whoever it is, they're going to tell me about the bad things that have happened. It's very rarely they want to talk about the positive stuff. And I mean, and when you look at, I personally don't ever turn on the TV anymore unless I'm watching like Netflix or Disney or whatever. But when you turn it on, it's negative, right? Like you look at the news. I mean, I stopped watching the news probably 3 years ago. And I know that's all they're trying to program you to think is all the bad things all the time, because it's about controlling that thought process. And I don't know, it's almost like they want you to lose hope with everything. And the reality is that gratitude is the key to happiness in life. Being grateful for what you have is the key to happiness in life. It really is. And it's not to say that you can't ever be sad or angry about something, but you need to be able to take a step back and look at the things that came out of it that you can be grateful for. And I look at that with my daughter. Like when my daughter was born premature, it was the most awful experience I've ever gone through in my life. I would never wish it on anybody, but I look back on it now and there are some positive things that have come out of that. You know, like I really learned not to sweat the small stuff because I almost lost my child. You know, I learned not to be angry about things because it's just not worth getting angry over. You know, when on days when my kids only ever want to be on top of me and I'm feeling like so touched out and just need space, I just take a breath and I think, I just need to soak this in because this almost wasn't my reality. You know, so as terrible as that was, I can look back on that and see the grateful things that have come out of that, because there's always something to be grateful for.
Touched out. I think that's such a great phrase. And because ultimately we do need our time, but those children and just touching and hugging and things like that, maybe that's part of the things that we need: more touch and hug and patience and and quiet listening. And I know my ADHD, OCD, and all those other things, so they spark up every so often, and I tend to speak in the midst of someone else speaking. So my practice is usually more.
Well, it's a good skill, you know, and I try and teach that to my kids. Like most nights before bed, we do 5 minutes of yoga, and it's just sitting on the ground and doing our best to just be mindful and listening to the music and being still. And particularly with my 7-year-old, you know, she does struggle to quiet herself. And this is a skill that I'm trying to teach her, and she's getting better at it. And it is a skill. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I feel like the same as it is with gratitude. The more you look for things in life to be grateful for, the better you get at it and the happier you are.
A spiritual practice, mindful practice, gratitude practice, every day, infinite times a day. That's something that weave in. Where do you put physical activity and exercise in your practice, and how do you share those type of things with your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a huge fan of physical exercise. I love it. But that being said, that doesn't mean that I think you need to go to the gym and work out for 3 hours a day. I do a little bit of running. I used to be a long distance runner. But again, the more and more I researched it, the more I realized just that running is not good for you. Just to put it bluntly, it's just not. And so I slowly switched over to doing more weight training. I do a little bit of running still because I do really enjoy it. But mostly I look at doing weight training, and I lift heavy weights, and I lift heavy weights probably 4 or 5 days a week, but I do it for about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. Like, you don't need to go and you don't need to be crazy. And honestly, if that's not your jam, find something else to do. Go for a walk, take your dog for a walk, pick up a bicycle, you know, like I feel like people shy away from the physical side of things because they automatically think I need to have a gym membership, and then they get overwhelmed because everyone there knows what they're doing and they can't set the time aside in the day. And I understand all of those things. So when I talk to my clients about doing being physical, and I mostly talk to them about movement, basically is what I say. You need to just do movement. And I encourage them over time to incorporate some weights because it's important that we have muscle about us. But yeah, it doesn't need to be for hours a day. You can do it at home. I have my own setup at home here. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be hard. And there's a lot of really great programs out there. Ketogenic has a great one. It's free. It's a free program on the website. Their 5x5 program. It's amazing. It takes half an hour, 3 days a week.
There are so many free resources to all of this. YouTube and Instagram, all these things have great resources that you need to learn. And we don't need to pump heavy irons because we don't need to build the bulk. We just want to keep the strength. And so many people are so sedentary. So simply doing work around the house, going for that walk, doing the yard work and things like that, light stuff, nothing heavy, but be creative in life. So tell us a little bit about your music and teaching and your social work, and how important those things are to also your health and wellness.
Yeah, I mean, music for me has always been a way to express myself. Again, being introverted, I'm not really good with talking to people. I'm not very good at being social. I tend to put my foot in my mouth all the time, not intentionally. I've gotten better as I've gotten older, but I certainly still do it from time to time. And music is just a way that I can just sort of escape into myself. And I think that it's a really useful tool for people to have if they've got, that passion. And so I really like sharing that with people. I really like teaching people music. I like making it accessible to people. As I said earlier, it can be really inaccessible because of the cost of it. So the things that I can do to make it cheaper for people, I try my hardest to do that. Teaching private lessons is a lot of fun. I haven't done it in a couple of years now, but I did it for most of my life, from about the age of 12 until I was about 27 years old. It was a pretty regular thing for me. And then I find it's a pretty amazing way to reach kids. You know, when I taught in Australia, my first year I was there, I was teaching at a school that was in a really low socioeconomic area. And often, you know, a lot of the kids there, they didn't even get to go home every night. You know, they didn't know where they were going to be. And it was a pretty horrendous situation for a lot of them. And I had two boys in my class. It was my year 9 elective class for music. And they didn't want to be there, and they fought me hard, and it was a struggle. And the first few weeks was a lot of, they were getting in trouble for things, and it was an argument back and forth. And at that point I just realized this is totally not productive. So I sat down and we had many conversations with each other, and I learned a lot about them. And what I discovered is they both liked to play guitar, and they both really liked Aussie rock music. So what I did was I changed the order in which I was teaching things in that class, because we were going to get to Aussie rock music, but it wasn't going to be until the following semester. And I knew at that point I was going to lose them, you know? And so I changed the order in which I was teaching. I started doing the Aussie rock music, and I slowly brought them in, and we were able to bond over this mutual thing that we had in common, this thing that we liked. And by the end of the year, they were my 2 best students. Wow. And they showed up to class every day, and they were happy, and they were excited, and they were engaged. And not only were they showing up to my class, they were showing up to their other classes better as well. So it really just helped them connect with me on a deeper level.
And part of the problem in teaching is we're trying to teach kids what we want them to learn right now, rather than listening and learning about where they're at and what they want to. Still learn the instrument, or write the story, or find the books, but inspire. We need to be inspired by them, don't we?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It needs to go both ways. And when you just, when you're just trying to shove that information in, and it's not going to go in. And I mean, when a kid who doesn't necessarily have a safe home to go to at the end of the day, they're not going to care about the stuff that you're saying to them if it's not relevant or meaningful to them. You know, like, you need to be able to connect. And I find music is a really good connection tool on any of those things, because you can always find music that somebody likes. You know, not everybody likes other things, but I feel like everybody likes music of some shape, variety, whatever it is, right? There's going to be something there that you can talk about.
So you mentioned The Secret and Magic by Rhonda Byrne. Yep. Do you have any other particular books you're inspired by that you can share with
I really like Ryan Holiday. He's a great author. Yep. So The Ego is the Enemy, Stillness is Key, The Obstacle is the Way. So those 3 are amazing. I really recommend reading those. Mindset by Carol Dweck was another one I really liked from a mindfulness point of view. And then if you're looking at like developing some better habits in your life, Atomic Habits by James Clear was a really good read. And then, I mean, from a nutrition standpoint, certainly like The Big Fat Surprise. I feel like everybody needs to read that book. The Sacred Cow was really good too, by Diana Rogers and Rob Wolf. That one was really good. And Gary Taubes, again, another great author. I mean, pretty much anything you read by him is going to be amazing. I particularly liked Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It. I really liked Dr. Ken Berry's book, The Lies My Doctor Told Me. Thought that was a really, really good read. I'm reading Sally Norton's book right now, Toxic Superfoods. I'm only part of the way through it, but it's an interesting read so far as well. And I think, again, for people who, you know, believe that all these vegetables are really good for you, like get diving into the current literature. And that's a really good start. You know, I mean, when it comes to like oxalates, there's no better authority on the planet than Sally Norton about that stuff. You know, she'll set you straight on it.
All these authors are teaching us, and reading and listening and watching and communicating these stories, and listening and reading something you don't believe in. That's our biggest challenge, right? And I'm sure as a vegan vegetarian, it was a challenge for you to sort of begin to listen to these opposite ideas, but you were noticing something was wrong in your life, and no matter what you were doing, it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And so
it is a challenge, because it challenges your ideologies, right? And it's hard when you have these things so firmly cemented in your brain. And I know for me as a vegetarian, and thinking I was doing not only the right thing for me, but saving the planet, you know, and that's why so many people want to take that leap. They want to save the planet. And And I know better now. And I'm really glad that I know better now, that cows are not evil and that they're actually the thing that can save us from climate change if it's done properly. And they're super, nutrient dense and all the rest of it. And but you're absolutely right. It is hard. And it's part of the reason why I recommend so many different people for people to listen to, like it's one thing for me to say, well, go and listen to Dr. Kiltz podcast. Like they're amazing, because they are, but you're one person. Right. And so then I can say, no, listen to Sean Baker as well. And then go and listen to Judy Cho, and then also look up Kelly Hogan. And then like, you can just list all these people. Right. And really start to get this holistic picture from all these different viewpoints of all these people and see, and people like the steak and butter gal, like that's an amazing story because she also was vegetarian, right? Like the same thing. And same with Judy Cho. I think that's one of the reasons I was really drawn to both of them, is because they've got such a similar background to me, doing the vegetarian thing for so long and thinking you're doing it right and just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And then taking a pretty incredible leap of faith in the completely opposite direction.
The plants control the planet.
Yeah.
And the microbes control the planet. If you think about it, I mean, ultimately we're all gone, but the microbes and the plants and the insects are going to be around, and we're going to be fertilizer for them all.
Yeah, well, they're very smart, and people cottoned on to that early. I listened to an interview with Belinda Fettke a while back, and she dove into the history of vegetarian and veganism, right after her husband had been, pulled up in front of the medical board and all that. And it was interesting when you hear that, the roots of vegetarianism, they lie in the religious sector wanting to control the libido of men. And when you think about it, it makes sense, because you start to eat a heavily vegetarian or vegan diet, and what starts to drop? Your testosterone levels.
Yeah, your hormones are damaged. It's a neurotoxin and endocrine disruptor. And ultimately, I think it was back thousands of years ago to the priests, the popes, the pharaohs, the presidents, the dictators of the world that figured out that if I feed the masses mush, they will become addicted to the mush and highly controllable. Yeah. The masses will line up for coffee, tea, whiskey, wine, beer, pizza, bread, pasta, and mush. And the masters will eat the meat. And it's kind of a fun little story, but it is actually true. This is the hard part. And we are still highly controlled by the media marketing, which is still the religious, political, and the organizations that control what we hear, listen to, watch, and then consume. Because the marketing is all about drink wine, and even for pregnant moms, American Journal of OBGYN recommends a Mediterranean diet, and that includes wine on that list.
My doctor in Australia, when I was pregnant with my first, told me that it would be okay to drink wine when I was pregnant. And I mean, that's totally not the line they towed in Canada, so I didn't even go there. But I was shocked. I was shocked that was the line that I was given, that it's okay to drink wine. And I couldn't believe that she was telling me that from my doctor. All things. It was just crazy to me.
The medical profession is doing things that make us all question and become distrustful of their ways. And since very few doctors, and we are seeing more and more that are beginning to listen and learn about keto and carnivore and make the changes, but the pervasive message out there is plants. And I was talking to a vegetarian this afternoon, and she's having trouble getting pregnant. She's in her 30s, late 30s, 39. And I didn't know she was a vegetarian. I asked her everything she eat, and basically was a vegetarian. And I suggested a few things. And right away, because they know my direction, many people take it very offensively. And I said, well, listen, I'm just sharing ideas that you might want to learn. Whatever you do, know this, we support you, but we want to give you information so you can make the choice of which way you want to go. But if you knew that the source of birth control pills and the abortion pill is from a plant, and you don't know what those plants have inside them, and we know that sugar is deadly and damaging, why would you eat them thinking they're healthy, but it's because the brain and that ancient propaganda is so powerful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at that study that came out from Tufts University, you know, and it's talking about how frosted mini wheats are better for you than beef and eggs and cheese. And the number of people that are believing that, you know, like truly, I don't even know how to process that sometimes. It's just...
The largest cereal companies in the world are controlled by Seventh-day Adventists and other religious organizations. But, yeah, you know that Kellogg's and John Kellogg and the Kellogg's and Edith White from Seventh-day Adventists were propagating that message. Another question, we're all finishing up here in a few minutes, and is there anything that you've particularly learned from your clients that you think is really important to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, again, it would be about taking a holistic approach to your health. I feel like I can't say that enough. It's really important. You can't go into wanting to get healthier looking only at weight loss and seeing weight loss as the only thing and food as the only thing, because the reality is if you're overweight, you got there for a reason, and it was probably from some form of disordered eating. And whether that's just because you ate the standard American diet for so long, whatever it was, that if you're not looking at your health from a holistic point of view, your chances of being successful are a lot lower. I'm not going to say they're not there, because I have had a few clients that have been successful on it, but you will have much easier success if you look at it holistically. If you also look at your wellness, if you do the things, like I said, like talking about having a list of other things that you can reach for when you're feeling like you need to eat the food, incorporating the physical exercise. But like I said, make sure you're not going to the gym for 3 hours a day, like movement and something you enjoy. You know, like it's okay for me to say you should lift weights. If you don't like lifting weights, then you're not going to be very successful at it. Find something you like to do, right? If it's going for a walk, if it's going for a bike ride, whatever, you need to like it. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to do it. So find those things that you like, and yeah, have that whole holistic viewpoint of your health, and you will be far more successful. Not only because it'll be easier, but because you're going to see greater successes quicker as well. And you'll just start feeling better. And it's just, yeah, it's important.
There's a lot of similarities in the story, but each and every one of us is an individual that wants to make sure we're able to find the path that's right for us.
Yes.
Any thing that I haven't asked that you wanted to speak about? And the other side of that is there anything you'd like to ask me?
I want to emphasize how easy it is to do keto as a family. Yeah. I feel like, a lot of my clients come to me, typically they're women. I've had a couple men, but most of them are women, and they're really reluctant to do this with their whole family. And I'm here to tell you that it's very doable, and that's what we do. And that's not to say that my kids don't ever get treats outside of what keto is, because they do, but it doesn't happen very often. And I feel like it's really important to understand, to have these conversations with kids. I often hear people talk about how they want their kids to be on a standard American diet, because if you start restricting food, they're going to grow up with an eating disorder. And I can understand where the fear there is, but you got to know, with my kids, we talk about nutrition all the time. I don't tell them they have to eat this way because I tell them to. It's because we talk about the importance of the food we put in our body, what it does to nourish us, what does nourish us and what doesn't nourish us. And we have that conversation all the time, enough that my 7-year-old goes to school and talks to her friends and her teachers about it. Like tells them that she doesn't really eat much fruit. She doesn't really eat many vegetables. We eat a lot of meat because it's really healthy. And I mean, my 7-year-old is a tank. Like, she is just muscle from head to toe. She does parkour. She is like so strong. So I can guarantee you she's not lacking in anything. Mm-hmm. She can whip out 5 pull-ups in a heartbeat. Like, she's a strong, strong kid. So yeah, I think that it's important to do keto as a whole family. You're not going to damage your kids by doing it. It is the way we were meant to eat. And you just have to be a little bit more organized with the kids' stuff, and make a decision. If the kids are going to a birthday party, you need to decide, am I going to send them along something that's keto, or are they going to be allowed to have the cake? For my girls, they're allergic to gluten. So for the most part, the cake is out of the question. So I send them with something so they're not feeling left out, right? Whether it's a cupcake, a keto cupcake, or a chocolate bar, or something along those lines. And like I said, they do get to indulge in things from time to time. So like every Wednesday, our school does a popcorn fundraiser. My kids are allowed to buy a bag of popcorn.
Yeah, nice.
Like it's okay for them to have these treats. But 95% of the time, they eat a heavily meat-based keto diet. They're very happy about it. They love their bacon and eggs for breakfast every day. They love their steak for dinner every night. You know, we do a garden every year, but it's, you know, low toxicity, low starch veggies, right? Like, and, you know, they still get to partake in that stuff. They're not missing out. So it's very doable. And I really encourage you to do it with your kids, and they're healthier for it.
Family approach. And ultimately, that's what this is about, because if we're doing individually and not recognizing our family needs to be taken care of. And isn't a standard diet in a food addiction and or some sort of a food problem?
I think it is.
Right. So, you know, you're worried that your kid's going to have some sort of a food aversion or an addiction in the future, but in fact they do, because they're eating the diet that actually is, and it is the most damaging.
Yep, I totally agree. I totally agree. And it's not, and my kids don't miss out, and they're not unhappy, and they don't complain. Like, they're very happy with the food they eat, and ultimately it makes it easier for you. You know, like like I said, it's generally women I deal with, and it's generally the women I deal with who do the cooking. So here they are trying to get healthier and make good decisions for themselves, and they're stuck cooking 2 meals for every single serving of food a day, because the rest of their family wants to eat something different to what they're eating. And then they burn out, because that's really hard to maintain. And I know, because I did that for the first months I did keto. The rest of my family was still eating a standard American diet, which included my husband, who was addicted to potato chips and ice cream and chocolate. And so here I am trying to make these good choices with all this junk food still in the house. And it's just not sustainable. It really isn't. So bring the family on board.
Treats and holidays are time to time, not all of the time. And I think that's the problem. We've created the treat every day, and the holiday is every day. But holidays are time to time. Treats are time to time. Don't cheat, and you'll feel better. But by feeding the family a keto carnivore way, you really can go a long way. So, Alex Miller, thank you very, very, very much for sharing your story today. And tell us a little bit, once again, how people can find you.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. I followed you for a long time. It's a little starstruck being on.
Oh, God bless you. No, all of us together are stars, I say.
Great. Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Instagram. My page is genuinely.alex. You can also find me on Facebook under the same handle, although I'm not on Facebook as much. My website is www.ketocoachalex.ca. And yeah, I do coaching, keto and carnivore coaching. And I don't take on a ton of clients at a time, because I do have a family on the side. But yeah, we can set up a consultation and get to know each other a little bit and see if we're a good fit, and kind of go from there. And yeah, but I try and post pretty regularly on Instagram, often just the stuff that I'm eating, try and do some inspirational things from time to time. A little bit about, you know, what my family does with carnivore at different kind of special events, things along that nature. And then I share anything I find really great from other influencers that I follow on Instagram.
This is really a fun journey, and I love the community. That's why I think I found my home, my place. So many amazing people. Obviously, we have similar stories, but we also look at it a little bit differently. That's the beauty of it. Yeah. And different size, shapes, age, weights, genders, it doesn't matter, colors, everything. The beauty is that it's such an eclectic group of people. We're not all working to try to look like one thing. And that's why I think, you know, the most important part is don't focus on the weight. The weight's not the cause of disease. No, it's the deadly poisonous food that we've been eating. So
absolutely. And yes, the community is really important. Find your community. And there's a lot of great communities out there, and being part of that community is important, especially now, because eating a keto carnivore diet is, you know, we're outside of the normal, right? So it's nice to find and there are lots of people out there who do it. You know, like really, when you look around, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across everywhere that eat this way.
It's exponentially growing. And the beauty is that really you don't have to go to your doctor. The drugs will be gone in most cases. The dissections, the visits, and even all the checks of what's my lab, what's this and this and this, because this is really a health and wellness plan that doesn't require anything special. It's just eat our ancestral, natural foods, eat less frequently, and be grateful and mindful, and go do something every day.
Absolutely.
All right. God bless, Alex. Thank you. My best to your family. Thank you. We'll see you again soon.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. All right. That was really a wonderful podcast. And thanks for joining. And don't forget to check out drkiltz.com and Kiltz's Mighty Tribe and the 30-day carnivore course, which we're still offering. The special included is Kiltz's Keto is Carnivore and the daily inspirations, digital format. So again, thank you for being here. Dr. Rob Kiltz, blessed, be well. God bless.